Good morning. This is Ron. It is April the 24th, Wednesday. Welcome to Story Time. Okay, this morning I'm going to be doing my editorial. Start off with my editorial, then finish up the chapter 15 of Ayn Rand's philosophy, Who Needs It, and then a very short critique of Rush Limbaugh, and finish it off with, of course, some jokes from the New York City cab driver joke book. Back in a minute. Okay, so I'm back, and when you're listening to Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity et al., they all do this top-down analysis. They're convinced that our culture is shaped by our politics, that somehow it is the politicians that magically, I guess by passing various laws, shape our culture. And it's not true. Nothing is going to change until and unless the culture changes, or at least appears to change. So, one of the things in terms of the culture of the country has changed is that it used to be decades ago that 4 or 5 decades ago that the American people, American culture, part of American culture was the idea that you didn't accept anything for nothing. You accepted nothing for free. It was a slogan that was no such thing as a free lunch. Anytime that you went ahead and accepted something for quote unquote free, that then you are actually indebted to whoever it is that gave it to you. And that's the way it used to be. The left has been changing that culture, and they change it with the idea that if you don't take something that's offered to you for nothing, you're crazy. And so now we have a culture in which people constantly go around looking for something for nothing, whether it is welfare or food stamps or student loans or grants or other types of, usually it's going to be federal or state government money in some way, shape, or form, but they're always looking for something for nothing. And Rush Limbaugh happens to be, or at least professes to be, a conservative. But one of the things that Rush Limbaugh will do on his show, is, especially around Christmas time, is give things away for free. He gives away iPads and iPhones and asks people what color you want. And Christmas time, he gives it out to, seems, every caller. Every caller that gets through gets a free iPhone, gets a free iPad. Not because they've done anything to earn it, not because they've won it as a prize, but because he's just giving it away for free. And so what he is doing is reinforcing the idea that getting something for free is a good idea. He will then do some kind of an editorial or say on his radio show, gee, it's really sad about welfare, and it's about the food stamps. He and Sean Hannity went on, made a big deal out of during the Obama's administration, the fact that food stamps recipients, the number of food stamp recipients went up, and the number of welfare cases went up, and just generally made a big deal out of anything that was considered a freebie. Yet, he contributes to the mentality. If that you want to get rid of welfare, if you want to get rid of food stamps, the way to do it is by set up a situation, a culture where people simply refuse to apply for it. If nobody applies for welfare, the program will have to go away. If nobody applies for food stamps, the program will have to go away. All of the programs that are in place now. If people would simply refuse to apply for those programs would dry up and blow away. A lot of the, by the way, the encouragement of the left for people to take things that are free is helped in order to help public employee unions. So that's another way that, because all public employee unions have an inherent conflict of interest and are therefore inherently corrupt, and therefore they must go. They must be eliminated. You've got to get rid of them. So, but because of public employee unions, then you have again the politicians that are out encouraging people to take freebies because the more people take freebies, the richer the unions get. Is what about what it amounts to. So the two things. Number one, like I said, regardless of whether or not we have unions, if people refuse to take free things, then those giveaway programs will simply dry up. They will be eliminated because they will no longer be any use for them. There used to be a guy on TV that had a book, a big, thick book. I think I saw it at the library, and it listed all the government agencies where you could get free things, all kinds of different free things. And it was a big, thick book. But anyway, so Rush Limbaugh would be doing better to go ahead and not give away free, not to emphasize the idea that, or reinforce the idea that getting things for free is a good thing. It also, with Rush Limbaugh, you feel psychologically beholden to Rush Limbaugh. If I go ahead and I go on his show and I accept um, uh, an iPad or an iPod, then don't I aren't I going to feel obligated to listen to his show? And other maybe what I'll do now is I'll go out and get his newsletter, or I will go ahead and do his 24/7 subscription or something because I feel obligated, and that's part of the reason why there's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody gives you something for nothing, and you're going to feel obligated to that person. And you don't want to get into a situation where, people are going to come back later and say, "Hey, I gave you something for nothing. Now you owe me." You don't accept something for nothing. And that's one of the things that the Rush Limbaugh listeners could do if they want to help change the culture. Is the next time they get on Rush's show and Rush says, "Hey, you are a great caller. I want to go ahead and give you an iPhone." You say, "No, thank you, Rush. I won't accept anything for free. I'm not going to take anything that I didn't earn." That's American culture, and that's the way it should be. Okay, when I come back, I'm going to be finishing up the chapter 15 of Ayn Rand's philosophy, Who Needs It? Okay, so I'm back. And so, chapter 15 is Censorship, Local, and Express, in which Ayn Rand is analyzing various Supreme Court decisions that have to do with pornography and censorship. And so, when we left the last part of it, it was about how the contradictions that the court had gotten into in terms of there's those that supported um, they basically end up supporting censorship by saying that it's okay to restrict pornography. There is another side of the court that was saying you can't do that because of freedom of speech, the First Amendment to the Constitution. And Ayn Rand pointed out, yes, but uh, how can you say that there's freedom of speech with regards to pornography, but there isn't freedom of speech for businessmen vis-a-vis the Sherman Antitrust Act, etc.? It is sufficient to reiterate, Mr. Berger declares, quote, the well-settled principle that Congress may impose relevant conditions and requirements on those who use the channels of interstate commerce in order that those channels will not become the means of promoting or spreading evil, whether of a physical, moral, or economic nature, unquote. And if this were not clear enough, a footnote is added, quote, Congress can certainly regulate interstate commerce to the extent of forbidding and punishing the use of such commerce as an agency to promote immorality, dishonesty, or the spread of any evil or harm to the people of other states from the state of origin, unquote. Immorality, evil, and harm. By what standard? The only rights by which the 5 majority decisions leave you are the right to read and see what you wish in your own room, but not outside it, and the right to think whatever you please in the privacy of your own mind. But this is a right which even a totalitarian dictatorship is unable to suppress. You are free to think in Soviet Russia, but not to act on your thinking. Again, Justice Douglas's dissent is the only voice raised in desperate protest. Quote, our whole constitutional heritage rebels at the thought of giving government the power to control men's minds, unquote. The division between the conservative and the liberal viewpoints in the opinions of the Supreme Court is sharper and clearer than in less solemn writings or in purely political debates. By the nature of its task, the Supreme Court has to and does become the voice of philosophy. The necessary to deal with principles make the members of the Supreme Court seem archetypal of the ideas, almost of the soul, of the two political camps they represent. They were not chosen as archetypes. In the undefined, indeterminate, contradictory chaos of political views loosely labeled, quote, conservative, unquote, and, quote, liberal, unquote, it would be impossible to choose an essential characteristic or a typical representative. Yet, as one reads the Supreme Court's opinions, the essential premises stand out with an oddly bright, revealing clarity, and one grasps that under all the lesser differences and inconsistencies of their followers, these are the most basic premises of one political camp or of the other. It is almost as if one were seeing not these antagonists' philosophy, but their sense of life. The subject of the 5 obscenity cases was not obscenity as such, which is a marginal and inconsequential matter, but a much deeper issue, the sexual aspect of man's life. Sex is not a separate nor a purely physical attribute of man's character. It involves a complex integration of all his fundamental values. So it is not astonishing that cases dealing with sex, even in its ugliest manifestations, would involve the influence of all the branches of philosophy. We have seen the influence of ethics, epistemology, politics, aesthetics, this last as the immediate victim of the debate. What about the 5th branch of philosophy, the basic one, the fundamental of the science of fundamentals, metaphysics? Its influence is revealed in and explains the inner contradictions of each camp. The metaphysical issue is their view of man's nature. Both camps hold the same premise, the mind-body dichotomy, but choose opposite sides of this lethal fallacy. The conservatives want freedom to act in the material realm. They tend to oppose government-controlled production of industry, of trade, of business, of physical goods, of material wealth. But they advocate government control of man's spirit, i.e. man's consciousness. They advocate the state's right to impose censorship, to determine moral values, to create and enforce a governmental establishment of morality, to rule the intellect. The liberals want freedom to act in the spiritual realm. They oppose censorship. They oppose government control of ideas, of the arts, of the press, of education. Note their concern with academic freedom. But they advocate government control of material production, of business, of employment, of wages, of profits, of all physical property. They advocate it all the way down to total expropriation. The conservatives see man as a body freely roaming the earth, building sand piles or factories with an electronic computer inside his skull controlled from Washington. The liberals see man as a soul freewheeling to the farthest reaches of the universe, but wearing chains from nose to toes when he crosses the street to buy a loaf of bread. Yet it is the conservatives who are predominantly religionists, who proclaim the superiority of the soul over the body, who represent what I call the mystics of spirit. And it is the liberals who are predominantly materialists, who regard man as an aggregate of meat, and who represent what I call the mystics of muscle. This is merely a paradox, not a contradiction. Each camp wants to control the realm it regards as metaphysically important. Each grants freedom only to the activities it despises. Observe that the conservatives insult and demean the rich or those who succeed in material production, regarding them as morally inferior, and that the liberals treat ideas as a cynical con game. Control to both camps means the power to rule by physical force. Neither camp holds freedom as a value. The conservatives want to rule man's consciousness, the liberals his body. On that premise, neither camp has permitted itself to observe that force is a killer in both realms. The conservatives, frozen in their mystic dogmas, are paralyzed, terrified, and impotent in the realm of ideas. The liberals, waiting for the unearned, are paralyzed, terrified, and, frequently, incompetent in or hostile to the realm of material production. Observe the ecology crusade. Why do both camps cling to the blind faith in the power of physical force? I quote from Atlas Shrugged. Do you observe what human faculty, what doctrine the mind-body dichotomy was designed to destroy? It was man's mind that had to be negated in order to make him fall apart. Both camps, conservatives and liberals alike, are united in their hatred of man's mind, i.e., of reason. The conservatives reject reason in favor of faith, the liberals in favor of emotions. The conservatives are either lethargically indifferent to intellectual issues or actively anti-intellectual. The liberals are smarter in this respect. They use intellectual weapons to destroy and negate the intellect. They call it to redefine. When men reject reason, they have no means left for dealing with one another except brute physical force. I quote from Atlas Shrugged. The men you call materialists and spiritualists are only two halves of the same dissected human, forever seeking completion, but seeking it by swinging from the destruction of the flesh to the destruction of the soul, and vice versa, seeking any refuge against reality, any form of escape from the mind." Unquote. Since the two camps are the only two sides of the same coin, the same counterfeit coin, they are now moving closer and closer together. Observe the fundamental similarity of their philosophical views. In metaphysics, the mind-body dichotomy; in epistemology, irrationalism; in ethics, altruism; in politics, statism. The conservatives used to claim that they were loyal to tradition, while the liberals boasted of being progressive. But observe that it is Chief Justice Burger, a conservative, who propounds a militant collectivism and formulates general principles that stretch the power of the state way beyond the issue of pornography. And it is Justice Douglas, a liberal, who invokes the traditions of a free society and pleads for our constitutional heritage. If someone had said in 1890 that antitrust laws for the businessmen would, sooner or later, lead to censorship for the intellectuals, nobody would have believed it. You can see it today, when Chief Justice Burgers declares to the liberals that they cannot explain why rights, quote, should be severely restrained in the marketplace of goods and money, but not in the marketplace of pornography, unquote. I am tempted to feel that it serves them right, except that all of us are the victims. If this censorship ruling is not revoked, the next step will be more explicit. It will replace the words marketplace of pornography with the words marketplace of ideas. This will serve as a precedent for the liberals, enabling them to determine which ideas they wish to suppress in the name of the social interest when their turn comes. No one can win a contest of this kind except the state. I do not know how the conservative members of the Supreme Court can bear to look at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, where his words are engraved in marble. I have sworn eternal hostility to every form of tyranny over the mind of man. Permit me to add, without presumptuousness, so have I. And that's the end of chapter 15. And one of the best things about this chapter is it very ably illustrates how it is that we have a very active leftist polity in this country. It's not so much because the left is so able and cunning and shrewd and competent. It is because they meet with little or no resistance. Because the very people that are supposed to be standing athwart history yelling stop are too busy, which is the conservatives, by the way, are too busy picking their nose. Okay, when we come back, I'm going to be doing a quick, short critique of Rush Limbaugh, and then after that will be the jokes from the New York City Cab Driver Joke Book. Okay, and I'm back, and this is going to be short because there's really nothing here. I'm looking at the app, the Rush Limbaugh app from his, which is basically transcripts from his show yesterday, and so much of this is just crap. I mean, it's worthless. It's worthless to mention. It's worthless to discuss. It's worthless to critique. He's got the beginning of the end of the Russia hoax. Drain the swamp. The swamp has Trump outnumbered, but he's still standing. So what? CDC tries to bury a report on defensive gun uses. Again, so what? Kellyanne's beatdown of Dana Bash. I mean, that's a really desperate. If Rush Limbaugh's really got nothing to talk about, then he's going to resort to a interview of Kellyanne by Dana Bash, and how it was just fluff. It was a big who cares situation. Trump voter explains why she voted for him. So what? Why is Chuck so worried about how Democrats spend money? Which is F. Chuck Todd, who's a guy I think from CNN. And again, who cares? The Trump investigation hoax unravels, and I think I touched on a little of that yesterday. And it's also another snoozer. So much of the investigation about Donald Trump is paperwork. It's all about paperwork crimes. It's about who didn't dot their I's and cross their T's, and I don't care about it. I'm not interested. My attitude is if people have committed crimes, fire them, prosecute them, but get on with it and quit boring me with the details because I just couldn't care less. So much of what Rush Limbaugh talks about is just so damn irrelevant to day-to-day life. It's not just him; it's Sean Hannity as well. And John and Ken show are better. Again, when they're talking about things that have to do with the city and the state, they were on talking about the homeless and the homeless problems that we have in Southern California. So they have a tendency to be much more relevant than the national talk show hosts, including Glenn Beck. And there's a few others that I'm sure that I'm missing, Michael Reagan, et cetera, but I don't listen to Michael Reagan and some of these other people. And so, yeah, like I said, so much of this is crap. What he should be dealing with, and all of them should be dealing with, is how each individual conservative can deal with the socialists, the liberals in their lives. Because we all know people that we run into each and every day. Our parents, our children, our brothers and sisters, family members of various sorts, our co-workers, people that we meet in the stores, in various stores that we frequent. We might go to Vaughn's and be standing in line and have a socialist or liberal quizzing us about whether or not we voted for Donald Trump or why we voted for Donald Trump, that kind of thing, or making snotty comments in general. How do we deal with that kind of thing? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to hear from Rush Limbaugh, Ayn Rand, et al. So, and that's what I'm trying to do with my podcast, is bring that situation to people and give them the right answers in terms of how to deal with the left. And generally speaking, when you're dealing with somebody from the left, you're dealing with somebody that is thinks that they're a leader and a change agent. So if you don't know what else to say to the liberals and the socialists in your life, one of the best answers that you can give them, no matter what they say or what questions they ask, is, hey, I'm sorry, but you're not a leader, you're not a change agent. You weren't appointed, you weren't voted into office. You want to be a leader, go run for office. Okay, so when I come back, it's going to be the New York City cab driver's joke book. Okay, so this is the New York City cab driver's joke book by Jim Peach. A wife begins to get a little concerned because her husband has not arrived home on time from his regular Saturday afternoon golf game. As the hours pass, she becomes more and more worried until at 8 o'clock the husband finally pulls into the driveway. "What happened?" says the wife. "You should have been home hours ago." Harry had a heart attack at the third hole, replies the husband. Oh, that's terrible, says the wife. I know, the husband answers. All day long it was hit the ball, drag Harry. Hit the ball, drag Harry. One night I was talking to a man, and after conversing for a few minutes, completely out of the blue, he asked me, if you woke up in the morning and found Vaseline on your asshole, would you tell anybody? And I said, no, I wouldn't. So he said, well, would you go camping with me? That's an old 7th grade joke. A 2nd grade teacher says to her class, children, we are going to begin to study sex education. Tonight, your first assignment will be go home and find out what a penis is. Little Freddie goes home and asks his father, Daddy, what is a penis? The father pulls down his pants and points proudly, saying, son, that is a perfect penis. The next day when the boy arrives at school, his best friend rushes up to him on the playground. Freddie, I forgot to find out what a penis is. What's a penis? Freddie says, come on. So they both go into the boy's room, and Freddie pulls down his pants. He points down and says, there, if that was a little smaller, it would be a perfect penis. Two psychiatrists who are friends happen to run into each other on the street one day. One of them says to the other, you're fine. How am I doing? A Polish man down on his luck sees a newspaper ad that reads, wanted, male volunteer for research project, $500. Call for details. Polish man makes the call. They tell him to report the following morning and then give him the address. The next day he shows up right on time and is met by a man in a lab coat. He's taken into a room and they explain to him what the research project is all about. The nature of this experiment, says the scientist, is to learn what would happen if a male human mates with a female gorilla. Your job would be to have sex with the gorilla. Now, do you think you're still interested? The Polish man thinks for a couple of minutes, then says, all right, I'll do it, but only under 3 conditions. Number 1, I absolutely refuse to kiss the gorilla on the lips. Number 2, I won't spend the night. After it's over, I go home. Number 3, the $500 will have to be paid in installments, because I just can't afford that much all at once. And that's it for this episode of Story Time. And until tomorrow, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.